All right. Hey guys, welcome to episode one of the Special Fish podcast. I'm here with Braden Carpenter.
You got
And
that right.
oh yeah. And today we're gonna be talking about what it means to be human through the book Ishmael by David Quinn.
That is right.
Yep.
That is his name.
And so I think we're gonna start off with going over really like a huge part of make what makes us human in mother culture. And really, Braden, for those who do not know, what do you how do you define mother culture?
Well, I think if you read the book and you actually know some things, like, yeah, I know a thing or two, kind of like farmers insurance. I think mother culture is supposed to be kind of like a cage in a way. It says it's all good, but it really isn't. See, it's like there to protect us and nurture us, but that's great when you're like younger and more naive and dumb. But when you're older and you still need that same nurturing and validation, it kind of blocks you from actually seeing the world for what it actually is. In a way, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of blinds us from certain ideas that we wouldn't really think of
Yeah, reality.
due to mother culture. And it's kind of a handicap on our society in some ways.
Yeah, actually, why do you think Ishmael has the expertise to actually talk about mother culture?
Yeah, I feel like he's more qualified to like criticize humans because he's looking at it from the outside in. But since like he's since he's an animal, but he also might have some discrepancies against humans since he's been in captivity and been basically forced to like perform for people, I
Yeah,
guess.
they locked him in a cage, pointing their fingers at him, laughed, and called him Goliath. That's pretty harsh.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think his qualifications are?
Well, I think, like you said, his qualifications are from that too. Like, you know, like you start to stop trusting people if you're locked in a cage or a room and they refuse to help you out. It kind of does something to the soul. But they also called him Goliath and stuff. And then that old guy came along, basically saved his life from being living that knockoff carnival circus thingamajig that starts with an M that I can't think of its name right now. And they made it new in a way, you know. He gave them the name Ishmael, telling about how his family, not Ishmael's family, but the Shakalov's family died during the Holocaust, and how cruel humans actually can be. People like Hitler and Stalin and Mao Zedong.
Yeah, he kind of gave him that basis of information to like start exploring what what humans are about.
Yeah,
But yeah, and that kind of brings us into this theme of like freedom and captivity, and like how sometimes we feel like we might be free, but we're kind of being held captive by mother culture in some ways.
yeah. I think like mother culture in a way is also a like it's a more fancy term for comfort zone, you know, because the things with humans is like once we're comfortable, we don't want to leave it. As like the great Mr. Nelson once said, if you're laying in bed trying to read a book, you won't get much reading done because you're going to be so comfortable, you're going to be ready to go back to bed. If you live your life in this comfort zone, you're not going to get much done because why would you? You feel comfortable, you feel safe. If you feel safe, you feel like you don't have to do anything. If you don't do anything, then you go, what's the real meaning? You know? And
Yeah,
I think a great example of this is like people living in a cage and living in their comfort zone and not knowing why they do it is the Civil War, for example. The South got so mad over hearing the concept of ending slavery, something they grew up and lived with, that they were willing to die and fight over it. But in reality, a lot of the Southerners that were fighting didn't own slaves. They just thought it was good because that's what they were taught. They're kind of like in this comfort zone and they didn't want to try something new.
Yeah, they kind of like created these excuses in their heads for like why it was right that they didn't really like hold themselves accountable for like what they knew was probably wrong.
Yeah, as who is it? Somebody said it, but yeah, the South would say like, oh, they're better off with us than free. But as soon as those slaves got a chance to join the Union Army, they were already hopping the border and joining the Union Army, leaving their the plantations and stuff in a heartbeat. So they know they just kept on making excuses.
Yeah, and really, just kind of bring this back into the Freeman captivity. You don't really know that you're being held captive until you know what freedom feels like, in a way.
Yeah, kind of like yeah, because kind of like how in a way Trevor Noah in that book is his mom's in that relationship with Abel, which is quite abusive, but she doesn't really know it's abusive until she eventually leaves, because you get used to it, you get comfortable to it, that you don't actually see that the damage is actually doing, and it can and probably will cause a problem, because there's a lot of issues of that. Like if you don't acknowledge a problem's there because you're so comfortable with it, then how do you plan on growing as a human being? And that's kind of what mother culture does. It shoves us in this comfort zone that we can't leave, a cage of our own creation, in a way, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it and just kind of like moving on from this point, um, we've also got this underlying theme of the takers and the leavers. And the takers are really self-considered more quote unquote civilized,
Yep.
while the leavers are more primitive. And I mean, obviously, the takers represent humans and like our
Yep.
society, and leavers are the animals. But really, like, they're not that different in a way.
Yeah, they
I don't
act
know.
like
What's your opinion on the takers and leavers?
yeah, humans act like they're different animals, but in reality, the only thing that's different between us and our closest ancestor, chimpanzee, is we have a bit more brain cells in them. We're really very similar. We do some of the similar things. There's an ant I know of that actually will enslave other colonies of ants to do its own bidding work, kind of like humans have done throughout history. We act like we're different animals, but we do a lot of what animals do. We store food like squirrels and stuff. And when something is different, we fight over it. For example, back in 0 BC, from 0 BC to 30 BC, in the area that's not considered Israel, Jesus, did his thing, spoke what he considered was true in that, and they got so many people in higher power mad because it was different, new. Jesus is saying you shouldn't be following these authority figures that just lie and kill people, because that's not true. That is not what God wants you to do. God wants you to help others out. God doesn't want you to have money. He wants you to give it to the poor, the people who need it and stuff. And that kind of ended up getting him killed, because the Romans at the time didn't want to believe that there was another thing to go. They feared his words. They feared him, even though he didn't even fight back or anything, in a way, That's kind of what mother culture does and what humans do. We're afraid of the unknown, and we're afraid of change. We're afraid of losing what we don't really own, in a way,
Yeah,
So we hurt others over it. But in reality, what we think we own and what we want is already gone.
yeah, and I mean, multiple times throughout the book, Ishmael kind of criticizes religion, but I mean, it's the root of a lot of bad things like wars and territorial disputes over, as well as like ideological disputes, but also brings people together in some ways.
Yeah,
Um, I know that both you and me have been positively affected by it, but he he seems to have more of a negative light on it.
True, yeah. Kind of, but I think his negative light on religion and stuff isn't the religion itself; it's the people. For instance, because throughout history, people have twisted and turned the words of religion for their own personal gains. Um, Joseph Smith basically did that in a way. During the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, all that, they just twisted the words of God so they can use it to defend their killing, their massacres and stuff. So that way they don't seem like animals. That way they don't have to take the blame. I mean, this kind of gets what the human brain does, is because it just doesn't want to know it's wrong, so it will make up this like full on lie that we tell ourselves. That way we feel right. Anyway, I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I feel like in a way it's almost like, again, trying to justify kind of what we know might
Yeah.
and what we know might not be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It's all about how like you use it though. It's like anything else.
Yeah. Kind of like a
Um,
drug, or like, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Um,
Would you like compare mother culture to a coconut? Because think about it, just hear me out. What is a coconut has this hard, rough outside shell with this nice liquid inside that tastes good, and you will never. But that liquid won't be exposed to the elements unless if it breaks out of its hard shell. So that's kind of like what mother culture does to humans. It puts us in this hard shell that we'll never break out of unless if we try to. And sometimes with a coconut, you need some help breaking out of it, because you sometimes have to break the coconut open to get the milk. You know?
yeah, maybe Ishmael is that hammer that breaks us out of the coconut.
Exactly. So what do you think, how do you think this ties us all into the phrase what it means to be human?
Yeah, I feel like this is all like kind of bring us back to it because throughout the book it feels like Ishmael is trying to tell us that like humans are incredibly narcissistic, not as
Yeah.
like a personality trait, but just like as a society. Like we own everything and it's ours to ruin almost in a way.
Yeah.
Um and kind of the idea that we're takers and that and mother culture have all like kind of, I shouldn't say like persuaded it, but it's all like
Yeah.
boosted it in a way.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just, yeah, I think what it means to be human is kind of like what you said, is like we take and we take, we're narcissistic in a way. We're naive and we're arrogant to our own undoings, because in order to know what we're doing, we would have to open our minds, you know? But we would rather kind of in a way be say closed minded, because it's kind of brave to see the world with an open mind in a way. So like we choose the narcissistic arrogant path because that's what feels safe to us. It feels comfortable in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So really the what makes us human is almost our faults in a way.
Yeah.
It's our errors and our imperfections that make us human.
Which makes us great, which makes us different than animals, because sometimes we can embrace our mistakes and sometimes we can't. It's these faults and imperfections that make us who we are, and sometimes they're for better and sometimes they're for worse. But sometimes suffering and can actually lead to something good in the end. You know, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. That seems to wrap things up.
Yep. Thank
Got
you for
through
having
all
me on.
of our absolutely. It's been a great first episode.
We should get that
And
second episode
yeah,
going at some point.
yep.
Well,
Second episode will come out.
I would shake your hands, but clearly I can't. So yeah, gonna
Yep.
you should
All right.
end this.
See you in the next episode, guys. That concludes it for today. And would you like to do the honors?
Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell.
Ding ding. All right. See you guys.